Hi, this is Jeff with Mr. Hardwater. When you first begin operations with your new blast kits or the hopper system, there's a couple things to keep in mind in order to keep the systems operating effectively. Now, if you think about it, there's only a few key elements of the systems. Number one, you're going to have a pressure washer. That drives the power. Number two, you're going to have the pressure washing blast head. That's what's going to inject the media. And third, you have the bucket that contains all the media. And then you need a way to transport the media from the bucket to the blast head, and that's going through a hose. And then finally, you're going to need the media carburetor and the funnel in order to keep that media flow running smoothly. So to get started and to avoid problems and to troubleshoot your operations when you get going, what you need to do is take each element on its own and keep each one working well. So if we're going to take the first element first, that would be the pressure washer. So if you are having issues with the pressure washer, the thing you want to pay attention to is the size of the pressure washer. You really want, on the minimum, is a 3,500 psi, 3.5 gallon per minute pressure washer. You need that power of the pressure washer in order to activate the Venturi blast head that connects onto your lance. So number one, make sure that you have the right pressure washer. Number two is that when you first start your pressure washers, you generally want to clear the line or bleed the line before you hook up the water hose to your pressure washer. That means turn on the pressure from the faucet first, clear all the air out of the line, let the water run for a minute to get water in the line, turn off the hose, and then connect up that hose line to your pressure washer. If you do that, then you're getting all the air out of the line, and you're going to be able to start up your pressure washer and get the water moving through the pressure washer. So once the pressure washer's dialed in, you got the right size, you got all the air out of the line, and it's ready to go. The next thing that you want to do is make sure that the blast head is operating correctly. So the blast head is behind me. We have it screwed into the lance as shown here. And so in order for this to operate effectively, the first thing you want to remember is to keep the blast head upright like this. You always want the media flowing up and down into the blast head, because otherwise, if it was rotated upside down, then water, as it was traveling this direction, would leak back down due to gravity and run back into the media hose, and that would just clog up the hose and create more problems. So number one thing about the blast head is to always operate this with the media port up on top. That being said, if you ever set the lance down on the ground, try to set it point down first so that you're draining the water out of the blast head. It's okay to shoot level with your body and even shoot up. That's not a problem when you have your finger pulled on the trigger, because there's plenty of water and suction driving the media up. But what you don't want to do is you really don't want to let your finger off the trigger and water to kind of bleed back down through the hose, or if you lay it down, you don't really want water to dribble down through the hose to clog up the media lines. That's going to create problems. So the next thing to consider with the blast head is that it's really nice to screw these blast heads directly onto the pressure washing lance, and that'll help eliminate the sloshiness here associated with those quick connect fittings, because they have a spring and a ball bearing, and they're kind of jiggly, and a little bit of air gets in there and you get a little water leakage. And it also seems safer to me to have these things screwed directly on. So that's another thing to consider when you're operating these. And let's see, and a very important thing when you're first starting these systems up is to remember to put inside here the correct nozzle tips. Now the nozzle tips are the silver small pieces that go inside this cavity of the blast head. Now if you were to replace this, what you do is unscrew this, put the nozzle tip inside, and then re-screw it back on. And there's a video on that. I go through detail how to do that. Now if you are just starting your operation and you feel like you don't have enough suction power associated with your system, that is one of the things to check first, is to make sure that your nozzle tip is matching the power of your pressure washer. Okay? So if your pressure washer is working good and if you have everything set up right for your blast head, the next thing to take a look at to make sure it's working properly would be the bucket or the stake. So when it comes to the bucket and stake, the blast kits are very simple because you have a hose like this and you simply have the stake. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you don't have any clogging at the bottom of the stake. Otherwise you won't be able to get any draw from the bucket and through the hose. So if you're having issues there, always check the stake and check the hose lines. Now the hoses will slip right on over the stake like this. This hose will go right on top of the blast head like this. And that's pretty much it. So if you're using blast kit 1, blast kit 2, and you're having an issue with the draw, then pop off the hose and make sure that there's no water in the line. Make sure that you don't have any media stuck in here, and make sure that the stake is unclogged. And if it is, then unclog it and you should be ready to go. One more thing is that you do want to make sure periodically that you don't have any media stuck or drying inside here. If it's stuck, then you can take the bottle brush that comes with the kits and just jam it down in there to keep that clear. Now, another thing to keep in mind when first getting started and getting things operating correctly is the hose length. Now, I recommend that you shorten the hose length here down to 10 feet instead of the 20 feet that it ships with. You can simply take a razor knife, cut it, and just use 10 feet. Now, if you ever want to splice the hoses together again, all you need to do is use the hose barb connector that's included with the kit to connect them back up. Now, the reason I like to shorten up the hose is because it just reduces the amount of friction that the media has to endure while it's being pulled out. So it just makes it easier for the pressure washer and the blast head to pull that media through the line. Now, if you have a very strong pressure washer, 4,200 psi or around 4,000, you're going to find that the longer hose will probably be okay. But if you're operating down towards the 3,500 psi machines, then I think you're really going to need to shorten up that hose length. Let's see, another thing to consider too on the correct operation of these systems is the media carburetor. Now again, the point is to get the media from one point to another. So if you've got everything set up and you're experiencing some draw problems or media flow problems, check your media carburetor. Make sure that these ports right here are clear, that you don't have any media stuck in there. And if there is media stuck in there, just clear them out with the bottle brush that's included in the kit. There's a separate video on how to take everything apart and how to fix it. Another thing to consider too is if you don't have enough draw and you're using the media carburetor, then it may be possible that the holes are offset. So your media stake here is offset from the base hole. That'll make a difference when you're running the blower systems, because remember, the blower air is going in here and coming out right underneath the draw tube. So if this is offset, you're really not pumping any air up underneath the draw tube, and that'll cause some flow issues there also. So in general then, if you're going to be using the media carburetor, the tube simply goes onto the blast head like this, and in this case the hose would be going right onto here. So if you're using the media carburetor system and you've got some draw issues, then it's got to be coming from between this point here in your bucket and the blast head. So that means you got a hose clog, or you've got a clog here, or you've got a clog here, and you need to separate everything out and start figuring out where the clog is. Let's see, another thing that may be happening if you're having a startup issue is that it's possible that if you're running the media carburetor, it's possible that you don't have enough air coming from your shop vac blower, or perhaps you have too much air. So for example, keep in mind that the blast valve, the blower valve, is going to be able to regulate the air. Now if you have this fully open and you're blowing air through here, you may have too much air flowing through here because you could be blowing so much air right up and underneath the steak that the media doesn't have time to mix with it and get sucked up into the tube. So if that's the case, simply close down the valve a little bit and you'll be okay. If you're operating the system with less air, and if you're using a heavier media, then perhaps you might need more air just to help drive and push some of that media up underneath the sand steak. Now, in general, though, if you turn the valve off, you can run the media carburetor without the blower because it's simply acting as a base to hold up the steak, and you should be fine there. So another thing to think about too, if you're having issues with the flow when you're just getting started, or if you've been running the system for a little bit, one thing is that when the steak is in the bucket, you may have problems when the media gets to about the halfway point of the steak. Because when this is sitting in a bucket, as the media goes down here, the steak's going to have a tendency to fall over and drift. When it falls over like this, it may be sucking more air than media. So if that's the case, you're going to have to run over to the bucket, shake the bucket, and reset the steak. So that often happens, like the system runs really good for a while, and then all of a sudden it peters out. And that's because you really need to reset the steak in the media and shake it around a bit so that the steak has an area to draw some media. Now that won't happen if you start using the media carburetor, because with the media carburetor, the funnel is making all the media flow to a central point where it's all being collected and blown up under the steak. So that's the whole point of the media carburetor and funnel system, is to help that media flow better. So if you're having issues there, if you're having issues with the blast kit 1 and 2, it may be due to the fact that you're running out of media and the sand steak has drifted off, and you're really sucking more air than the media. So overall, the system is very simple, but it does have its elements. You got the pressure washer, you got the media in the bucket, you got the hose that connects it, and then you have the media carburetor and funnel and the blower system, which helps to drive that media through. So if you're having issues with the media flow, then check each one of those components and make sure your pressure washer is powered enough, make sure that all your hoses are clear, and make sure that you don't have any water in lines. If you do, clear out that media, start again, and establish new pressure. Make sure that your bucket is operating effectively. Make sure you have enough media in there, the sand steak's upright and vertical. If you're operating the media carburetor, make sure that you're not blowing too much air. Make sure that all the ports are cleared out, and make sure the media is flowing there. And if you're able to address each of the elements of the blast kits and the hopper systems, you should have some very effective and very powerful cleaning with the blast kits.